Ladies and gentlemen, give an Edinburgh welcome to Andrew Johnson.
So we're going to talk about energy today and some of my experiences with being involved in research in that as well as some of the actual research itself. We're going to look at what we mean by free energy, and we're going to look at what some people have said about free energy devices. We're going to look at Tesla reproductions. We saw Tesla there in the introduction video. Look at one of his experiments that's been reproduced. We're going to look at Wilhelm Reich very briefly. Cold fusion, which is a very key factor. You saw another video of me talking about that. It's key, very key information in this, cold fusion. Mentioned John Hutchison. He's very important, particularly in relation to the events of 9/11, which is something that people won't talk about, I've found. And we're going to mention Bedini motors and another one. I might have to skip over some of this, though, because of the time limits we've got. I want to try and get to Bruce De Palma and the N machine, also very important to know about. We'll look at the deaths of inventors in this field. And Dr. Stephen Greer also needs to be looked at due to his ongoing efforts in this field, or are they really efforts, or efforts of what kind? He's just released a new film, which I've written a review of. And why we haven't got widespread use of free energy. And then we're going to look at the weaponization of this technology, frankly, which is, again, what people won't talk about. Sorry about getting used to the microphone and the airflow. So what you commonly hear, if you bring up the topic of free energy, saying, well, we can have energy from nothing, we don't need to burn any fuel, people will say, well, free energy is impossible. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Free energy is impossible. It breaks the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Heat and mechanical work be mutually convertible. That's essentially a version of the first law of thermodynamics, which is trotted out by the scientists. If someone had created a free energy device, they'd be a billionaire. Really. That's often said, because everyone would want it. So therefore, the person that produced such a thing would be very successful financially. It's obvious, isn't it? No one has demonstrated a device which produces more energy than is fed into it in some form. Is that true? That's what scientists will tell you. But I don't believe that. I think that's false. Over unity. What's that? Well, over unity means you can get more energy out than you put in. That's what over unity means. It comes from when you divide the amount of energy output by the amount of energy input, and you end up with a figure greater than 1. And in physics and elsewhere, unity is another name for 1. And it's confused with perpetual motion, in that because the idea is that if you could produce more energy out than went in, you could connect the output to the input, and the device would then run itself. But it's claimed to be impossible. So, I like to start off with a bit of history, because the history of free energy goes back at least 150 years. Michael Faraday, Fellow of the Royal Society, 1791 to 1867, was an English chemist and physicist who studied the magnetic field around a conductor carrying a DC electric current. And he established the basis for the magnetic field concept in physics. He discovered electromagnetic induction, diamagnetism, and the law of electrolysis, the laws of electrolysis. Michael Faraday did an experiment on December the 26th, 1831, in which he co-rotated a magnet with a copper disc and measured a current around it, a current output. Even though he had done that experiment, his own law of induction tended to ignore that he'd done this. Known for over 150 years, the operation of the Faraday homopolar generator, whose current generation could not be properly explained. They couldn't explain how this worked. This is an example here of the homopolar generator. The world later embraced Faraday's two-piece induction motor, and then the rest is history. So we went away from this type of what could have been developed into a motor, and we went into a motor with a commutator and so on, and things that were developed from that, and the rest is history. And we've talked about Tesla there. One day, you saw him in the introduction clip there, man will connect his apparatus to the very wheelwork of the universe, and the very forces that motivate the planets and their orbits and cause them to rotate will rotate his own machinery. And Tesla's experiments show that there was a radiant energy field, and that's what we're going to see, something related to that now. And Niagara Falls famously used Tesla's generators, and there were some very anomalous effects with those. When they switched those on, they got very strange sort of back EMF output, which they weren't expecting. And when you look into this, again, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There is so much stuff that you will find if you go and research this. And here's just a few of them. The hydrosonic pump, which was developed in the 1980s, that appears to put out more energy than is in it. That's a mechanical device. There's a magnetic sync circuit that Wilbur Smith designed in the 1950s. That could extract energy from the Earth's magnetic field. And the Schauberger's repulsine experiments, which were said to have been taken in the 1930s, were said to have been taken by the Nazis into the Nazi saucer program, allegedly. I don't know how much truth there is in that, but certainly Schauberger's devices seem to be a very interesting area to study. And it took in water, and then the water would spin inside the device and create an anti-gravity effect. But the general characteristics of energy devices that you'll come across when you research this is that you have components spinning at high speed, or you have very high voltage involved, or very quickly oscillating magnetic or electric fields. And once you start doing this, say greater than 20,000 revolutions per minute, or greater than 50,000 volts in electricity and equipment, you get these other effects coming out. That's what seems to happen. So we're going to look at some of these now, some of these techniques and devices. Now, there have been a number of reproductions of some of Nikola Tesla's experiments. A number of interesting YouTube videos have been posted, and they reproduced the wireless transmission of power Tesla called this radiant energy. Now, I particularly was alerted to this experiment a few years ago by Carl Paulsness. I think I'm just going to play the video. I've got lots of video clips for today.
Good afternoon. I'm going to show you a few things that Tesla has sent to us many years ago. Out of his lectures, books, on page 134, figure 19, you'll see the circuit right here. And also the same circuit can be found in his book, The Innovations, Research and Ratings of Nikola Tesla. In this book here, it's found in several places. The one we're going to be demonstrating today will be on figure 183. Also, I've gained some of this information from Jerry Vasilato's book, Lost Science, and his other book, Secrets of Cold War Technology. Both are invaluable. Here you'll see my setup. It's two copper rods connected across the top with another copper rod that is on a slidable scale. I can slide it up and down. I have lowered it from the higher position today just so you can see it on the film. My camera is not quite tall enough to catch the whole thing, but it's slides up and down. It's just two parallel bars of copper. At the bottom of there is capacitors, just like he says in his book, and the spark gap in the front here, powered by a 10,000 volt transformer at the back. And I'll be connecting light bulbs across the bars on these two slidable points, both of which are independently slidable. All light bulbs are 110 volt bulbs. The only little bulb will be this bulb right here, which is a 12 volt light bulb. That's for out of an automobile type bulb. And this fluorescent tube here, I don't think it has a voltage rating on it. And we also have this big fluorescent tube over here. So I'll turn the machine on now. Arc is quite loud, so I won't be talking during this part of the demonstration.
So the point about me showing you that clip is that that is not what we call normal electricity. Energy is being used to illuminate the bulb, but it's not travelling down two wires, or down one wire and out the other one, whichever way you look at it. It's a different version of electricity. So you look at a different kind of energy, or slightly different kind of energy. That's, you could see, because it was, he was putting his hands in the water and the bulb's illuminating, but he wasn't being shocked by that. And then you come across other people like Wilhelm Reich, who, again, doesn't really get talked about a great deal. He discovered a form of energy called orgone energy. And it seems to be the energy from which everything is made, or that's what he thought it was. And some people would call this zero-point energy, etheric energy, vacuum energy. There's various names for it, but it seems to be different forms of the same thing. It seems to be some manifestation of energy from the underlying substrate of our reality. And Wilhelm Reich, if you look into what happened to him, he ended up in a prison cell, and that's where he died. Reich actually studied this energy in relation to human sexuality, because it seemed to come into play in relationships. And he actually worked as an assistant to Sigmund Freud. Very interesting person to go and research. I'm not, you could do a whole presentation on him, and you'll find whole presentations on YouTube about him. Reich constructed and conducted experiments with orgone accumulators, which I'll probably mention a little bit more about. And one of the people that found out about Reich was Dr. Eugene Malev. He's a key figure in what I call the energy cover-up, in trying to break the energy cover-up. Malev believed that current physics, based on the quantum mechanics and relativity, is almost completely wrong. He became interested in Wilhelm Reich's work following his examination of working orgone accumulators, which were producing anomalous forms of energy, or anomalous energy output. And in the 1990s, he sort of formed groups to work on things like cold fusion and other free energy technologies. He was very well qualified. He had a doctorate in environmental sciences and a degree in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is where he worked. And he was chief science writer at MIT News Office when the cold fusion affair, which we're going to talk about, I'll show you a clip of, erupted. And I've got a clip here. Now, orgone accumulators, what are they?
Alexander Correa
I'll let him try and describe it.
Paulo and Alexander Correa have in their laboratory done many further experiments to clarify some of the many, many confusions that Reich himself had about this. They have established the irrefutable presence of an ether, a mass-free ether that can be analyzed with thermometers, electroscopes, which shows that it is possible to make little motors that work on it. Earlier, they had this patented technology that I referred to called the PAGD, which has 3 U.S. patents, 1 Israel patent, and so forth, that have pulses occurring in vacuum between aluminum plates in a glass cylinder and produce more energy out than in.
Would you say that this ether is a normal occurrence in the universe?
It is,
and it's a natural thing?
It's the foundation of the universe. There is no other foundation of the universe. The myth of relativity, and relativity is wrong, it is incorrect. Indeed, its equations describe certain experiments, accelerator experiments, very accurately. There's no doubt about that.
An outcome, I guess, right?
But the theory can be wrong. In other words, an equation can give you a very precise match between an experimental result in an accelerator, as an example, and the theory, but that does not mean that the theory is fundamentally correct. In fact, it is fundamentally absolutely wrong. There is no such thing as non-simultaneity and so forth. It's all, unfortunately, a myth. As far as advanced spaceflight, we'll seriously have to revise the Starflight Handbook someday.
And what does it do in terms of speed, Eugene?
There's no limitation on speed. The myth of no massful object could go faster than the speed of light is just that. It's a myth. It's observed in accelerators that you have to put more and more energy in to accelerate electrons. There's no doubt about that, okay? And you do reach a limitation if you're accelerating electrons with the kind of a way they do it in accelerators. But fundamentally, there is no limit for a spaceship made out of mass, okay, namely us or a rocket ship, to go as fast as we would ever particularly want it to go.
Well,
there's another myth of relativity. The twin paradox is also a myth, okay? It is just wrong. The time dilation is not part of the universe. It just isn't. No matter how many times they will tell you about muons changing their decay patterns coming through the atmosphere and so forth, and this proves supposedly time dilation, they can say it as long as they want, but there is no such thing. Now listen, since there's no such thing as space-time, which is this combined entity that came out of special relativity, there can be no such thing as a warped space-time that gives you black holes or gives you a singularity such as Stephen Hawking talks about or others in cosmology talk about. This has gotten into complete megalomania and insanity. But let me tell you, the joke, the cosmic joke of all time is on late 20th century and early 21st century modern physics, because history will record that they went off on a tangent with relativity and special and general, and they completely fooled themselves, while at the very same time making fun of such things that were giving them a hint as to the alternate physics, namely low-energy nuclear reactions, ether energy, what Reich came up with. These people ought to go back to Science 101. Science 101 is this: experiment always overrules theory.
So Malov, he basically became quite critical of mainstream physics, and he said that things like relativity were wrong, it didn't explain certain types of evidence. And some people would say that Einstein was put in place at that time to, popularize relativity, when really it didn't explain certain things that need explaining. Malov came to say that in the 90s. There was another clip there of Malov. I've got several clips of him where he talks about those orgone accumulators and how they were generating anomalous energy, and there were some experiments in Russia where they'd noted a temperature difference which shouldn't have been there, and they were using this to make a motor running on nothing. But I now want to switch to John Hutchison. I've got another video clip of me talking to him, and he was doing experiments starting in about 1979 up until the present day, and he was producing all kinds of effects in his laboratory, or his apartment actually, which doubled as a laboratory, including jellification of metal, bending and fracturing of metal, lift and disintegration of things, transmutation, which we'll come back to, one metal changing into another, fuming of objects, and disappearance of samples, and fusioning of dissimilar materials such as metal and wood without heat. And he's got 500 pounds of samples about these things, of these things, I should say. And I've got a clip of him he and I talking a few years ago on a radio show, and some stuff in the background. You've obviously been playing with this for a long time, and I know you've been through the wars, at various times with having your equipment confiscated and things like this. That I believe that's happened at least twice. Is that correct?
No, main time was 1990 when I was in Europe. It was the Canadian government that took the entire laboratory and tried to make a secret operation, but newspapers found out about it and published the news. Okay. And that was. But I've been raided before in 2000. Okay. And one of the things that we wanted to just check with you, that I believe it was in 1983. There was a person called John Alexander, Colonel John Alexander, in fact, who'd come to see you because he'd learned about what you were doing. I wondered if you could sort of mention a little bit about that. Oh, yes. Colonel John Alexander was 1983. He came with a team from Los Alamos, and he said to me that we're expecting a threat from, as I recall it, a threat from the Soviet Union. Okay. And that was a concern for the American government. So I gave a demonstration for about 4 months working with the team. And unfortunately, there were some effects that happened, and sometimes it didn't. It seemed like the equipment was sabotaged, and I learned from yet another lieutenant colonel that a fellow by the name of Bob sabotaged the entire project. So John Alexander was a little upset over that, and he brought in another team from McDonnell Douglas to do a clear, not classified report, which I still have that report. And then after that, of course, the Canadian government did their experiments and kept it a matter of national security. Of course. Now, I think that's really interesting that we do know that people in the military are well aware of what you've been doing. It's not as if you have been, working away totally as like a hermit. They're fully aware of what you've been doing. Mm-hmm. And we understand one of the key things is that in many cases when you start your experiments, you can switch off the power and the effect that you're generating will continue. Well, we're trying to do a parallel here, I believe, and when I switch off the equipment, sometimes there's metal samples that have been analyzed by the Max Planck Institute that seem to be accelerated ahead in time. Wow. And the crystalline structures are always changing very fast, and the magnetic properties are changing extremely fast. So this is in regards to when I basically shut down the power, these samples, which are many of them, tend to alter. Right. ongoing. The energy in the equipment has been measured at 100 to 400 watts. And when I was giving a demonstration for Maine News, the newscaster accidentally chopped the extension cord in half by accident and shut down the entire lab. So that's around 400 watts, the lowest power. And if I'm using more modern equipment, of course, I'm up to maybe 1,000 watts energy to drive the systems and that. The mayor of this city came here, and he's a couple of years ago talking with me, a friendly fellow, Mayor Wright of New Westminster, and he was talking about he's giving reports of concrete cracking up as well as citizens in distress. And it seems when I do an experiment like I did for National Geographic TV and Film, I blew out the elevator. So they couldn't get their equipment down after the experiment. And just recently, for Fox TV, I was doing an experiment, and then some plumbing exploded downstairs. But I take in consideration, too, that when I was doing the McDonnell Douglas experiments, that we had a water main explode out in the street. So that's written up in some of the text. So I've been through a lot of mischief.
I think one point I wanted to just dwell on for a second is that Judy and I we watch the internet forums quite closely, and there are quite a number of people who are saying, oh, John Hutchison can't reproduce the effects which he's makes, and I wondered what your response would be. I almost feel silly asking the question, but
I think they don't listen to radio or watch TV or read books, because I've been doing this quite regularly for Fox TV in 2000 and onward up for Griffin Productions as well as National Geographic TV and Film, and onward with many, many different crews have come and gone out of here, and I can sit down, turn everything on, and guarantee an effect within 5 minutes. So whatever they're reading is maybe so old that they just don't bother researching. That's what I feel.
So John Hutchison is generating all these effects. He used 2 tons of equipment to do it. And he's using about between 400 and 1.5 kilowatts of power, 400 watts and 1.5 kilowatts. A modern kettle uses 3 kilowatts of power. So he's using very little power, so he's levitating that 70-pound cannonball and so on. He's done that. Where's the energy coming from? Where's the energy coming from? It's coming from somewhere else. That's where it's coming from. Not coming out of the wall socket. So you can look at, I put together a website for John. It's called HutchisonEffect.com. You can go and look at there's audio recordings and various other things like that. John's also worked on these crystal batteries which appear to produce electricity from nowhere, only very small amounts, a very weak current. Not really practical, but they do produce anomalous energy. So I think probably if I play this clip next, which is kind of a potted history of cold fusion, which is vitally important to understand what happened with cold fusion. This is where the idea of free energy started to take hold in the academic community. And it should more correctly be termed low energy nuclear reactions. The somewhat inaccurate description of cold fusion appears to have been coined by Dr. Stephen E. Thermite Jones, the very same guy that some of you in the audience may have heard of.
Water itself is quite a mysterious and powerful substance. Given enough time, it can erode steel and rock. It is composed of hydrogen and oxygen, 2 of the most reactive elements on Earth. Science has also known for over 200 years how to extract hydrogen and oxygen gas from water through the process of electrolysis. It was from this field of electrochemistry and not nuclear physics that there emerged a revolutionary idea of a new kind of fire from water. In the 1980s, Fleischmann and Pons used their own money to conduct experiments for 5 years. They passed a current through an electrochemical cell containing heavy water, or deuterium oxide. One of the electrodes, the negatively charged cathode, was made of the precious metal palladium. The electrical current separated individual deuterium nuclei, or deuterons, from the heavy water and forced them to pack tightly into the palladium cathode. What happened next inside the palladium at the atomic level remains a mystery and became the subject of intense debate. Whether it was actual nuclear fusion or some other as yet unknown phenomenon, the result produced far more excess heat energy than any known chemical reaction. Why is such a phenomenon so astonishing? Why did it provoke such outrage in the physics community? To most classically trained physicists, the concept of low-level nuclear reactions producing significant heat energy was inconceivable.
It was a very unfortunate time to make such an announcement for various political reasons, really. The situation in the United States, the situation with regard to the program in hot fusion. That was against it. But also, of course, was the fact that we were not ready to make such an announcement. The criticism of pathological science is one which has quite frequently been leveled at unusual investigations, which admittedly sometimes are at fault. However, there is also the situation that people will criticize a field long after they should really have given up. And that is pathological criticism. They just get trapped in a situation. They have made a criticism. They have to maintain that criticism against all the evidence.
At Texas A&M, a group led by Professor John Bockris, who is widely regarded as one of the world's greatest electrochemists, reported finding the hydrogen isotope tritium, a key signature that some unusual nuclear reaction was going on.
The first thing was this thing called tritium, which was a sub-form of hydrogen which should not exist except in extremely tiny quantities. We found that by working these cells of Fleischmann and Pons containing lithium hydroxide and deuterium oxide, that we could produce this tritium in great abundance. Let's say at 10,000 times more than it ought to be there, as it were. And let me stress that we couldn't do it every time, but about one result in 5 or one result in 4, and eventually we worked up to 2 results out of 3. We could produce tritium. That was the first thing, and in a way it was the first clear proof of the phenomenon.
At Texas A&M, Bockris's group found themselves under attack. Science magazine writer Gary Taubes wrote a stinging article that insinuated that someone in the group had spiked the samples with tritium. Although unfounded and eventually proved untrue, the allegation effectively dampened Bockris's remarkable claims.
Well, I was 69 years old at that time. I took the attitude, suppose they fire me, right? It doesn't really matter. I'd had my career. The worst they could do would be to say, go, your tenure is withdrawn. And therefore I wasn't frightened. And I went on saying the truth and publishing what we'd got. But finally the university revolted against this. And they set up an inquiry, as they called it, rather sinisterly. The accusation was that I had carried out misconduct of research, you see, that I shouldn't have worked on these things. And they decided that the accusations were totally groundless, and they published all this. But then they started all again about 6 months later, and they had another committee. It was this time, when my lawyers asked the university what the second inquiry was about, they were told, it's an ad hoc committee. What's that? We have nothing further to tell you. And so this went on for 11 months of constant meetings and inquiries and so on. And I'm quite sure that they were trying to find an excuse to end my tenure, you see. Finally, they came out okay. I mean, they gave me another letter. I'd had the letter of complete exoneration. This time it said that they had spent this 11 months and had found that I had never done anything, the phrase used were, that contravened the rules of procedure of this university, or something rather formal and stuffy like that. But I think the main part was that I had done work which was against the paradigm, and that was what they were really upset about. You know, people said that they'd been to other universities and people had laughed at him and said, "What the heck are you doing, trying to disprove the laws of nuclear physics?" And of course that's exactly what we were doing, and succeeding, you see.
Even though positive results were still coming in, the Department of Energy's negative report effectively killed congressional funding in the United States. Fleischmann and Pons later packed their bags and left for France to carry on private research sponsored by the Toyota Corporation.
By 1992, we had video recordings of intense energy release. By the summer of 1994, we had demonstrated sustained energy release. That, of course, if you say you wish to make this into a device, required further research. And we were always working on a time frame of trying to get to that point by about the year 2000. And I think that if the resources had been available, we would have got to that particular point, probably before the year 2000. But this did not happen.
Yet as early as 1992, cold fusion experimenters began reporting unusual appearances of trace amounts of different metals such as copper, silver, chromium, and zinc when examining their spent cells. Rechecking for possible contamination, scientists like Bockris and Miley confirmed that indeed new metals and isotopes were being formed, transmuted, during the process which produces excess heat.
Kevin Wolf made many measurements of tritium. Then he got some even more astonishing results as early as '92, which were these transmutational results, the metal forming another metal inside the electrode, you see, which was super anti-paradigm. You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, which we mustn't use, but it was a form of that in a way, that was creating new metals, you see.
In Japan, Tadayoshi Omori and Tadahiko Mizuno at Hokkaido University have produced volumes of data under rigorously designed experiments showing the production of metals ranging from iron to platinum and beyond. The Omori cell using a tungsten cathode has consistently produced excess energy along with measurable amounts of transmuted metals.
So that's just a clip, or 10-minute segment I should say, from a film called Fire from Water, which was made by Eugene Malov in 1999. And it's a very interesting film, and it shows you that this cold fusion phenomenon should have been developed into a new type of energy source, but it was stomped on, it was crushed out of existence. I'm just going to do one more slide and then we're going to have a break. There's quite a bit of information about the Steve Jones character, who I'll maybe talk more about later. He basically, well, I'll just play this little clip, it's only like a minute long, and I think he came along.
Since Pons and Fleischmann were both well aware of the pitfalls of premature publicity, why would they bypass the accepted conventions of the peer review system and announce their discovery through the media?
I was thinking, these guys are no fools. They know what they're doing. These are good scientists.
Prior to the 1989 announcement, Stephen E. Jones, a physics professor at nearby Brigham Young University, learned of Pons and Fleischmann's work through an informant at the DOE. In a flagrant example of shameless opportunism, Jones insisted on going public quickly with his comparatively much less clear results. Disparaging the excess heat claims of Fleischmann and Pons, Jones' announcement would have effectively prevented the two scientists from patenting their process, a process they had developed on their own over long years of research.
Is it a shortcut to fusion energy? I don't want to disappoint anyone. I think I'll put my read my lips answer here, and then I'll carry on. I think that'll become clear why I'm saying that. Can you read my lips on that back in the back? It says no. Energy is a long way off. That's why I say no. This is our result. Just way off. It's I think a door that's open to us, but really a door on physics more than on energy. Geophysics in particular could be an interesting area.
And so this Stephen E. Jones character turned up 16 years later, after that clip was recorded, in the field of 9/11 research. Why would that be? Well, hopefully by the end of the second half, you'll know the answer to that question. I wanted to summarise what we saw with the cold fusion affair. I think the whole thing was stage managed from the beginning. When Pons and Fleischmann came out and, publicised their experiments with these effects, they had to get the big guns out to shoot them down. And it was the first time that the phrase pathological science was used to describe scientific research, first time to my knowledge. And people that I've spoken to, people say, oh, their results have never been reproduced. That's false. You saw in the film there that many people have reproduced the results in Japan, for example. Different reproductions have different results in terms of seeing what's called excess heat, getting out more energy than you put in. Evidence of a nuclear process, such as neutrons coming out, and tritium, which is this form of hydrogen. And transmutation of elements, alchemy in other words, changing lead into gold. Well, not quite that, but one metal changing into another metal. This is hugely significant things. So now we're going to switch to another area of research, a free energy device called the N machine. And this was developed by Bruce De Palma. De Palma studied electrical engineering at Harvard in 1958 and taught physics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology for 15 years. I've got some booklets in the box there about this if you want to pick those out, 50 pence for the booklets. So you can read bits of the history of Bruce De Palma. He's the brother of the film director, Brian De Palma. In his study of inertia, he developed a kind of rotating magnetized gyroscope. And he discusses this clip here. He discusses it in this clip.
Right now we have the entrenched energy monopolies and cartels. You know, we have OPEC and we have the 7 sister oil companies that control all the oil and energy. But what people have to understand is that the people who run the energy business in this world, which is the biggest business on the planet, turning over $4 to $5 trillion a year, it's bigger than guns and drugs, it's bigger than defense. They control the newspapers, they control the governments. But these companies are so big that they regulate the government, which regulates them.
In 1977, Bruce De Palma unveiled the first prototype of the N machine, an electrical generator which uses rotating magnets to generate up to 5 times more power than it takes to drive it.
I know about the fact that the Japanese government and the Indian government have ongoing projects to produce N machines for domestic power. My partner is Paramahamsa Tiwari, who is the director of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, which operates all the nuclear plants in India.
In late 70s, I learned from Bruce De Palma that he had carried out certain crucial experiments by rotating electromagnets.
Tiwari tested a prototype based on De Palma's N machine under laboratory conditions. The results were deemed too impressive, causing disbelief and suspicion among conservative government officials and the power consortiums that backed the project. Tiwari was forced to abandon the project completely.
One of the pivotal people that I encountered early in my career was Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut.
Edgar J. Mitchell, an Apollo mission astronaut, founded the Noetics Institute in Southern California. The Institute's charter was supposedly to develop alternative energy systems by attracting inventors from all over the country. Mitchell became extremely interested in De Palma's N machine. He made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which De Palma naturally refused.
He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off. So I was scared to death. The CIA operates through various very innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than a denying institute founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring free energy into the world?
And that situation still exists in the United States today, where a person that really understands what's going on just can't get their idea out because the alternative science and medical fields have been co-opted by the intelligence services.
And he converted this little engine to run on water. This is many, many years ago. And he used it for several years. And somehow the news got out, and one day he got visitors, and he was told to dump the engine or else. 3 weeks later, the man was dead. And the coroner's finding was that he fell off the back of a train. He was drunk. Now, it happened that he didn't drink.
There is no progressive science in a world where every scientific idea is evaluated for its military potential.
Power, or energy, control of energy equals power in the new world order that is emerging. If you control the energy, the way we get around, the way we get electricity, the way we have our TVs and video cameras and stuff, if you do the control of the energy, then you've got control of the people.
If you've got control of the energy, you've got control of the people. Well, this is one of the other strands of the control grid, or one of the other lines on the control grid is the energy. The other, of course, is food, banking system, health. Those are the other ones that have been tightly controlled. And I'm going to come back to Edgar Mitchell, who was mentioned in that clip there. That's a very important piece of evidence that Bruce De Palma talked about with Edgar Mitchell, because it leads on to a very important part of this whole picture. Yeah, this was not a surprise considering the condition that I had seen Bruce in when I visited him in December 1993. Bruce began each day upon arising sometime before noon with fine wine mixed with sparkling water. Years of alcohol and substance abuse finally took its toll. The mystique and enigma that encircled the life of Bruce De Palma was due in part to the fact that he was never able to prove his theories with a working Onevunity device. That's what you read on the internet about De Palma. But again, this De Palma end machine type device has been reproduced by a chap called Adam Trombley. He's developed a closed path homopolar generator. And then we've got another one. You keep coming across these, keep looking for them, and you'll see it's the same old story. In other words, De Palma developed this end machine, and it appeared to produce nearly 5 times as much energy out than as you put into it. But it never saw the light of day. Same with this.
Now to another good idea, and imagine a machine that could power your house for free. Well, that's exactly what 2 Australian inventors claim they've developed. Using magnets and a battery, their new generator has been described as revolutionary, and foreign investors are lining up for a piece of the action. Chris Allen reports.
So, John, this is the machine?
Yes, this is it, Chris.
What's it capable of?
Well, it'll power a house. The machine will provide sufficient electricity to run a house and have power to burn.
It sounds too good to be true, but inventor John Christie is convinced his machine will change the world.
So, John, basically you're saying this machine can produce 5 times as much power as it consumes?
Yes, it does. This one, exactly as we see it, it does. And in fact, it can produce more than that.
Once kick-started from a battery, John and his partner Lou Britz say this prototype will run for years without stopping, generating 24 kilowatts of power a day.
You don't get more revolutionary, I think. I mean, we're talking about something that has the capacity to change the way that the world produces its electric power. It has the capacity to change the way that cars are propelled. You can replace the combustion engine, in fact.
John, these are big claims. Are you sure you can live up to them?
We don't really need to live up to them, Chris. The technology speaks for itself.
I mean, a householder could buy one of these machines and install it in his garage and power his house forever without buying another kilowatt from a retailer. I mean, that's how serious it is.
Steve Brassington is an independent electrical engineer. He's seen the machine and backs up everything John says.
It's revolutionary. That's the only way to describe it. I think the technology It's not bending physics, it's just using principles that I guess are commonly in use in power generation today in a different way. These guys have thought outside of the square.
Basically, it's magnetic attraction and magnetic repulsion that provide the movement or the moment of the motor.
Can you understand why some scientists are sceptical about it?
There is no physicist or engineer who has looked at our motor or has looked at our figures who says it doesn't work.
Lou is an electrician and John a businessman in Cairns in far north Queensland. The two unlikely inventors have been tinkering with their machine for 6 years. They've applied for an international patent and have been swamped by people wanting a piece of the action.
These are the coils. We mentioned the coils don't get hot.
Local businessman Alex Roma is one of the many offering money to help develop the generator.
If it proves up to be what they say it is, it certainly would be something I'd invest in.
John has also spoken to millionaire inventor George Lewin, the man who came up with the Triton workbench and who's now setting up a fund to stop Australian inventions going overseas.
There's an opportunity here, I think, to share an invention with the world that is beyond anything that we've ever contemplated before.
Scientists here at the local university say while they're interested in John's machine, they're also cautious. They say if the machine can generate as much power as John says it can, then they will have to rewrite some of the laws of physics. And they've urged people to be cautious about investing in it until the generator has been independently tested.
Anybody who says it doesn't work hasn't seen it or hasn't looked at our figures. They haven't reviewed it. If they look at it, they'll all agree with us that it does work.
John says the household generator should be available in a year and sell for about $5,000. If he's right, it will make him much more. And how much do you think your technology could be worth?
I have absolutely no idea.
We could be talking about millions of dollars here?
Yes, I'd very definitely talking millions of dollars, but I'd hesitate to even take a stab at it.
Good idea.
Good idea indeed, a free energy generator. So if you go and look at their website now, you'll find that it doesn't exist. I looked at that, I've looked at it several times over the last few years, and it sort of said coming soon and under construction, and then I believe the domain name now has disappeared. So that device appears to have become history. Now, is it fake? Are the guys con men? Well, you're going to have to make your own minds up about that. I did hear that one of the guys, his sister, was killed not too long ago as well, one of the guys who was involved with that development. But really, I think one of the key things, another of the key things that I want to show you is the Meyer cell. Now, the Meyer cell is a way of using water as fuel, essentially. Uses a high-frequency pulse circuit of some kind. Seems to have some kind of feedback mechanism so that it will work with various types of water, either tap water or salt water, perhaps. But the process is that you break the water down into hydrogen and oxygen, right? And then you can burn the hydrogen to drive an engine for combustion. See, periodically they'll go on about the hydrogen car, for example. And they'll say, oh, the hydrogen car is the car of the future because it burns, when it burns, it produces water. But that's just nonsense, because there are two problems. One is the storage of the hydrogen. Storing hydrogen in a tank is extremely difficult and hazardous, right? So it's just ridiculous to sort of propose that you could do that. So you need an on-demand system.
Well, it was during the oil embargo of the United States. It alarmed me that a little country over in the Far East could actually cripple the United States. And realizing that the entire industrial base of the United States and the world is based on the supply and the utilization of energy, it became imperative that we must try to bring in an alternate fuel source and do it very quickly. Of course, I thought originally with the right type of funding, we could possibly get it in within 6 months. But reality shows that the 12 to 15 years was more correct in this projection.
Back in the 70s, Stan Meyer set out single-handedly to solve America's energy problems. He decided to do it using water, the world's most abundant storehouse of hydrogen, which is a far more powerful fuel than oil. For 15 years, Meyer has been fighting to get his inventions taken seriously.
Most inventors have to be a loner. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned and don't rely on other people to support you, because they will not. More times than not, an invention is really stolen from the inventors. Even in my prior development of high technology, I've had patents taken from me. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks to be very cautious.
Meyer has always stood out against the crowd. He has no formal qualifications as a scientist because he didn't wait to graduate from high school, leaving early to go straight into research at the high-powered Battelle Institute in his native Ohio. Now he works full-time as a private inventor. He's built a device with potentially revolutionary implications. There is nothing startling about a machine that can extract the hydrogen from water. What is highly unusual is that it should do so with ordinary tap water. The conventional method is called electrolysis. Meyer has turned that process on its head. Unlike electrolysis, his device doesn't use up large amounts of electric current, nor does it produce an enormous amount of waste heat. For 20 years, he has been refining a method to fracture water, which produces vast amounts of hydrogen on demand. This is not his latest apparatus. He was unwilling to let us point a camera at that. This is the simple device he used to convince a reluctant patent office that his revolutionary concept actually works. Alloy rods, acting as electrodes, are housed in a Perspex container that's filled with water. Normal mains voltage is fed in through a transformer, but critically, there is virtually no current consumed, less than half an amp. The result is dramatic. Hydrogen pours off with the flick of a switch. Meyer claims the key is his electronics, which pulses electricity rapidly across the rods at up to 20,000 cycles per second. In a way that's not readily apparent, this process transforms the equation. Whereas in conventional electrolysis, 3 times as much energy is consumed as is produced in the form of hydrogen fuel, in Meyer's apparatus, the reverse is true. It appears to produce several 100% more energy than it consumes.
Stan has something that's characteristic of the people that sound like they've done something to tap zero-point energy.
I'm going to cut that clip there because we're short on time. I'm going to come back a little bit to the Meyer cell. But basically, you saw there that he's developed a new electrolysis process, a new way of breaking down water with high-frequency electricity. That's how he was doing it. And he was getting out a lot more energy than he was putting in. That was the key. And you'll find out what happened to Meyer shortly. And then we have another thing, this HHO gas generator. This seems to be a related thing. This has become quite prevalent now. A lot of HHO gas generators and cells being developed. And then we have other things like the motionless electromagnetic generator, motionless electric generator, the MEG, by Colonel Tom Bearden. Now, his MEG device appears interesting, but I don't think this actually works. I don't think the people that have looked at this, it doesn't really seem to work from what I've read about it. But in 1985, Bearden made a presentation entitled Scalar Technology and Weather Modification. The segment of this presentation talks about interferometry. He's the same guy that developed this MEG and has been talking about free energy for a long time, for 30 years and more. And I noticed that what he was describing in this 1985 clip seemed to be very similar to how we think the World Trade Center was destroyed, which is described in this book, Where Did the Towers Go? And John Hutchison is doing interferometry of some kind by interfering radio waves, electrostatic energy, magnetic fields, and generating effects from doing that. But in Bearden, in his book, he's a clever guy, but he talks about the USA-Russia weather warfare, which I don't believe is the way it's being done. And he does not mention Hurricane Erin on 9/11. So this guy's talking about weather modification like so many others, and HAARP, but he won't talk about Hurricane Erin on 9/11 in the days, which again is covered in this book and on my website and on the DVDs. So now we're going to move more onto the energy cover-up. Why would anyone want to cover up cheap, clean energy sources? How can it be covered up? Surely it's just a tinfoil hat, nutty, crazy, whack job conspiracy theory. I tried to get them all in. One of the main things is the global energy industry, as it said in that clip earlier on. They have a vested interest in keeping us in the fossil fuel paradigm where everything's metered. We're getting a bit of a move towards solar power and things like that, but the technologies and wind powers, technology is not very good. It's okay, but it only works, it doesn't work very well. Now, Malov, for example, I've mentioned him already, he was very critical of what he called the academic government complex. And this is in this interview. This was his last interview. And he talked about how one of his bosses said that if I don't understand this process of cold fusion, for example, then it can't possibly work. Because I know physics, and I know that this can't work. So it doesn't work. So it's a fraud. That was the attitude of Malov's superior in his job, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So Malov resigned in 1989 to form the New Energy Foundation, and you heard him earlier on. Malov was murdered 17th of May 2004, supposedly in a burglary, botched burglary. So if you're the military-industrial complex that's actually got this technology already, you need to keep tabs on it.
Edgar J. Mitchell, an Apollo mission astronaut, founded the Noretics Institute in Southern California. The Institute's charter was supposedly to develop alternative energy systems by attracting inventors from all over the country. Mitchell became extremely interested in De Palma's N machine. He made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which De Palma naturally refused.
He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off. So I was scared to death. The CIA operates through various very innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than a benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring free energy into the world?
He was talking about bringing free energy to the world. Well, this is another guy that tried it, Stephen Greer. He he came up with this, Seize Power and Aero 2012. He wanted to connect inventors and inventions, investors. Now, he set up a website called seizepower.com. It contained an agreement for inventors to sign if they had a device that they wanted to develop or market. This agreement was quite comprehensive. You could go and read it because it's in the Internet Archive. Now, in 2007, Greer launched Aero 2012. And I looked at this website because I've been following the free energy scene for several years. And I noticed that these two websites were remarkably similar. In fact, I went into the Internet Archive the other day, and you can see that this Space Energy Access Systems website, home, about us, latest news, strategic overview, YCs. Aero 2012, which came along 6 years later, home, about us, latest news, award program, strategic overview, Y Aero, same article. This website was exactly the same as the one that was done 6 years earlier, apart from a bit of a facelift. This is Stephen Greer's research. Missing from this website was any discussion of what inventions they'd studied and how they'd been, funded or how they'd not worked. Greer posted a 1 to 2 hour presentation about Aero 2012. You can see this website on the screen here in the background. So basically, all he'd done after 6 years of research and getting money from various people was he'd produced a new website which had the same content as the old one, and a different layout. And now he's at it again. We just had this new film that's come out that some of you may have heard of, Sirius. Similar to Aero 2012, the Sirius Technology Research Initiative. Serious Technology and Research Initiative. It's also linked to the Orion Project, another of Greer's energy initiatives, which you can check out. And I've had to write and very carefully document what's been going on with these, because there is no free energy coming out of Stephen Greer's research and his projects. All it's doing is sucking in money, and it seems to be getting together people who are looking at free energy technology, and then he must be passing that information on to somebody else. He's acting as a collection agency. Now, I had this problem a couple of years back because I had a YouTube channel with about 270 videos on it. And I put the Tom Bearden clip that I referred to about this interferometry, his discussion in 1985 of this weapon system which used interferometry, which was based on a sort of free energy technology. And I got a copyright violation filed against my YouTube channel from Energetic Productions, LLC, right? Now, this is owned by Tony Craddock, and Tony Craddock and Stephen Greer have cooperated on certain free energy information, and you can find that on Stephen Greer's website. I wrote to Tony Craddock and I said to him, can you please lift the copyright violation on my channel, and I will take off the Tom Bearden clip, which you're claiming copyright of. And I never heard from Craddock at all. Craddock owns Tom Bearden's website and a couple of others in the free energy field. But Craddock.biz states that founder and president CEO Anthony J. Tony Craddock has 40 years experience in the international petroleum industry. And he lists all his clients, you know, all the oil companies, all the big oil companies are his clients. So he's the guy running free energy websites, yet he's a consultant to the oil industry. And he wouldn't let me have my YouTube channel running with my other stuff on it. Didn't even reply to me. And he's connected to Greer. And I've written an article, I've written a lot up in detail so you can read that on my website. I wanted to play this clip because this is a new development. I'm just looking at how we're doing for time. So we're getting close to the end now, really, the time. I'm going to allow time for questions. So I'm going to play this clip. Following this presentation, I gave this presentation Truth Juice to a small group of people in 30th of October 2012. And I was approached by a chap called Mike Clark. And Richard D. Hall and I had done 2 programs which aired on the 21st and 28th of September 2012, in which we essentially put together cold fusion, MyoCell, some of the stuff that Richard had been looking at. So Mike came and met me at Truth Juice. He also showed me one of his MagnaCare devices, which you can look at on magnacareuk.com. And later Mike Clark asked me to join the British Constitution Group's energy group. And then he asked me to speak at the BCG conference on the 24th of November 2012. And I'm going to play you a clip. And then we had a follow-up meeting in March. About 5 minutes, this.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Roger, for letting me speak. My name is Michael Clark. I am a retired scientist, physicist by profession. So I have an inherent interest in energy systems, and in particularly alternative energy systems, which have been hidden from us deliberately. Now, a person better qualified than me to speak about new energy devices and how they were suppressed is Andrew Johnson, who I will introduce in a moment. But I will say this final thing. We are currently working on fuel devices that are classed as over unity. In other words, more energy out than in. We should have something by 2015 that will allow every individual that's part of the BCG or lawful bank to install a unit into their homes and derive free electricity. You will never have to be on the grid. Thank you. Thank you. We haven't done it yet, but we hopefully will do it. Everything's looking very, very positive at the moment. All the results we've had so far have been positive, and I'll keep all members of BCG through Roger and his newsletter up to date on what's going on. Now, the key element of having a device like that, whether it's going to be magnetic or a water fuel cell, which are some of the things we're working on, the key element of having a device like that is that we can offer it to non-members as an incentive to join Lawful Bank and British Constitution Group. Who in their right mind is going to turn down a unit that's going to give them free electricity? Nobody. So what a great carrot to swell the membership. Come join us. We'll make sure you get one of these things. You will never have to pay electricity again. You can come off the grid. We don't want to give it back to them because we don't want anything to do with them, to be perfectly honest. But it's a great incentive, and it's a good way of swelling our numbers.
I'm going to call a close to the meeting, gentlemen.
Well, before you do that, Mike, could I just ask if there's any, because you mentioned previously, I was curious that you've been involved with some water fuel cell development a few years ago. And
yeah, about 5 years ago.
I just wondered if there's any, so obviously if anybody with experience like that can be fed into this process. I mean,
not really.
Why would that be?
Because the tank cell is a much simpler and I think much more efficient way of moving forward, rather than trying to do high-frequency electricity and pulsing it and messing around with it until you get exactly what you want.
So so you're saying then from that development, your experience was that you were using this...
It produced gas, but not very efficiently.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I think we were using 1.7 volts and 200 milliamps was our input current, and we were producing gas from a standalone cell, very much like Myers, that he shows on his papers in his video.
Was that your goal to sort of reproduce the Myers cell?
My goal today...
No, sorry, at
that point it was purely an experiment.
Right.
It was purely to, what's this all about? Let's have a look at it. We built it and it worked after a fashion. That's not what I want to do.
Right, was this
WFC is just a means to an end here.
Yeah.
We're looking for the most efficient way. Whether it's WFC or not, it doesn't make no difference what the method is, as long as we achieve the desired result, which is to provide energy for people for free.
So in your opinion then, from that development previously, you think that was sort of...
No, I don't think it's not a way forward.
Right.
I don't think you could produce sufficient gas in quantity to drive the motor, to drive the electricity generator.
Right.
This has, the tank cell is far better.
And was that you and a good group of guys, or was it?
Yeah, it was just about 3 or 4 friends.
Right.
We just got together, and lots of things we were doing at the time, not just WFC, lots of stuff. We built a little magnetic motor that was continually running, but not producing an awful lot of energy, but it was working on its own without any further input. But I think the tank cell has got the better possibility of actually achieving what we want to achieve quickly.
So you heard him talking at the BCG conference that they got positive results and they were going to have a device by 2015 to give to members, a free energy device of some kind. Yet when I asked him these things at this meeting to which I was invited, there was nothing. He talked about this tank cell circuit, which is basically, as you saw there, a very simple circuit consisting of a capacitor and an inductor. And it was, that meeting was, well, I could tell you more about it, and now Mike Clark has resigned from the BCG Energy Group and gone to do work healing Saudi Arabian racehorses, apparently. So my question is, what was all that about? So just going through some of the deaths related to free energy research. Wilhelm Reich found dead in his prison cell. Bruce De Palma, 1997. Stan Meyer, I've got another slide on that. March 21st, 1998. He was apparently poisoned. Dr. Eugene Malov, he was dead, 2004. James Black, who was trying to advocate the release of information about John Hutchison's research by the Canadian government. He was 51 years old and died of a heart attack. Arieme de Gaius, inventor of a revolutionary self-powering battery. He was found slumped in his car park, totally unresponsive, in the long-term parking lot of Charlotte Airport. And then Michael Zabur, nephew of William Zabur, who worked with Malov. He was Dr. Judy Wood's student. He was murdered on March 19th, 2006, shortly after posting research about 9/11. Stan Meyer and many others, always the same story. The Pentagon wants to see your idea. They tell you how they would like to use your invention. You demonstrate your device, proving to them that it works. Then they block all of your efforts and end up killing you. The only way to get a free energy device out to the public is to forget about patents, distribute it underground, sell it to EV enthusiasts with the plans, and encourage them to travel around and do as you are. You have then created a non-interlinked underground distribution system that will spread to general populations and will spread like wildfire. It will be unstoppable. I think something like that needs to be done. How you do it is a different question, but that's the only way it's going to be done. Now, some folks may have come and seen us in November last year, and I've now come to realise, because of people like Stephen E. Jones's involvement and because of the other evidence, the similarities of what happened to the towers and the Hutchison effect, the effects that were seen in that. This is one of the reasons why you're not allowed to discuss Judy Wood's research anywhere, even in truth groups. It is censored, and that's what my book's about. My book shows you the censorship, not only of this information in the mainstream media, but within the so-called truth movement, right in the middle of it, such as the BCG group, for example. This is what happened to the towers very quickly, to finish off. That's an 8-story building. That's what was left. That's World Trade Center number 7 there. These are 2 of the tallest buildings in the world. This was taken before 5:20 in the evening, and that's what was left of 2 of the tallest buildings. So, where did the towers go? No appreciable heat, yet the towers turned to dust. This is all in Judy Wood's book. So it's the technology that you're looking at. What technology can do this? Unburned paper littered the streets. People levitated but not burned by the dust. No bright flashes seen as the towers came down, almost silent. So it couldn't have been explosives, it couldn't have been fires, it couldn't have been nukes, it wasn't bombs. It's a technology. And it did this as well to these cars. Inflated tyre, wilted doors. And you'll find bits of plastic still intact within that, oddly. No paper burning cars. So what's happened is a mindset has been created, as with just about everything else that's going to be discussed today. A large part of the cover-up has been the creation of a mindset or view which says free energy systems are impossible. Especially in science, which dictates reality to everyone else, once a mindset has been created, the cover-up is easy, because the majority of people automatically reject any evidence that is shown to them. This shows how a mindset creates reality, i.e. we don't have large-scale use of free energy technology, even though we know that it is possible. We know that it's real. The same mindset applies to things like safe, cheap, non-toxic treatments and cures for cancer. Instead, we get, all these signs up saying, we're going to beat cancer, and race for life and all this stuff that's put in our faces every day. Marks and Spencer's trucks. We've reduced our fuel emissions. That's a lorry load off your mind. Sorry, it's not a lorry load of my mind, because that's a complete lie. All of it. Global warming scam is a lie. The fossil fuel paradigm is a lie. Is this how things appreciate John Carpenter? There's one particular little sentence or part of the sentence where the guy at the front is saying, thank you for helping in our quest of multidimensional expansion. What it seems like from what I've looked at is that we've got a breakaway civilization or something, some other group which is completely separate from us, which is keeping us in a certain framework which are not allowed to go outside of. There's certain things like free energy technology and an understanding of consciousness and things, which Anthony is going to talk about, will take us outside that prison, that box. And we're not allowed to go there. Energy is a big part of this, and it's another group that's at work here. They work in very mysterious ways, and they seem to have their fingers in everything, even into, things like Stephen Greer's groups that he's been running. That's been the evidence that I've documented. But that's basically it. There's lots of websites, lots of information, good and bad. You can always write to me through checktheevidence.com. I think we're going to have some questions out, which I'll try and answer. I've got loads of information at the back, so I'd like to finish just by thanking you very much again for coming and thanking you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. As usual, Andrew, a thoroughly, deeply researched and empirically proven presentation, as always with yourself. Andrew's research is amazing, and I do recommend you check out his site, Check the Evidence. What's going on today and everything is mind-blowing. What we're going to do now is have a little bit of question and answer time and so forth. So if you've got a question to ask Andrew, but first of all, I'd like you all to put your hands together and say, Andrew, thank you very, very much.
I'm just wondering if you have ever created free energy.
If
you've ever created free energy.
I've never created it myself. I've never been able to build a device. The closest I've really got to doing something like that is I built one of these little lifters, which is appears to be some type of small anti-gravity device which you can make out of copper wire, balsa wood and tin foil. And I did actually manage to get one of those to work using an old cathode ray tube, using the high tangent supply, which is about 20,000 volts. So yeah, I think there are certain things. One of the easiest things to try out is the Joule Thief circuit, which appears to have some interesting properties. That's quite easy to make. But there's lots of stuff, you can try out for yourself.
Do you think it was HAARP that destroyed the Twin Towers?
No.
No.
HAARP is very much talked about, but really we don't know what HAARP does. We only know, what is on the website, really. People make lots of claims about HAARP, but we don't really know what it does. There's a chapter in my book about HAARP and how somebody tried to say that it was used to destroy the World Trade Center. It wasn't. I don't think it had anything to do with it. By the way, my book is download. You can download it for free, particularly in ebook format. There's Kindle versions, iPad versions, so you don't even have to buy it. You can download it as well. But no, I don't think HAARP had hardly anything at all to do with 9/11.
Just wondering if there's anybody working on free energy now that you know of. Well, there are lots of people working on it that you can find out on their websites. Personally, I'm sort of in touch with John Hutchison. I know he's still doing stuff out he's in America now. He's moved from Canada, so he's still doing stuff. There's, there's loads of people doing stuff, but it's at a fairly low level. Now, when I did this talk in Hilversum in November, and afterwards some people came up to me and started talking to me. And one particular person came up and said to me something which I'd never heard before, and I don't know whether it's true or not. But he said that if there is a system in place such that if anybody anywhere in the world creates a free energy device and it puts out more than 3 kilowatts of energy from the device, it can be detected. It can be detected, and they will get a visit from somebody to ask them about their device and what they're going to do with it. Because almost universally, these devices disappear. They go, and so I think they must have some kind of tracking system which shows where they are. But that's off your original questions like that. I just wanted to add that.
Hi, Andrew. Is there any idea where the device was in New York?
No. We don't have the evidence to say where it was, so we can only guess. When I'm asked this question, I've been asked this question several times, what I tend to suggest is if you do a bit of research on John Hutchison, you'll find out that he uses 2 tons of equipment to generate these effects. And he uses signal generators, microwave generators, radar equipment, and so on. And it's generally old equipment, it's quite bulky, and he has to turn all the knobs himself, you know, to set all the right settings and tune it and get the effects. So I imagine that if you think of the miniaturization, you know, we used to have bricks, now we have these. I reckon that this part of this weapon system could be in a briefcase. There's more than one component to it, so it could be anywhere around the World Trade Center. A couple of briefcases could have been anywhere around there.
When you showed that clip about the 9/11 building coming down and the police car where the front of it seemed to appear to have melted, is there anything else that could have caused that effect? Because the paintwork was still relatively damaged, so it wasn't fire or where it would burn off.
The only thing that I know of that could have caused those effects is something like the Hutchison effect, because it's the only thing that I've seen which produces the deformation of materials without high heat. There can be a little bit of heat, but it's certainly not enough to like burn your skin.
What's that called, sorry?
The Hutchison effect, which is a name given to the experiments that, the results that have been seen in the experiments by John Hutchison. And it was classified by the Canadian government. His own research was investigated by the Canadian government, and they classified the report about it and wouldn't give him a copy.
What's your kind of view on ancient free energy technology? There's been speculations that the pyramids were in some way, shape or form used. You've got various monoliths throughout the world, and even to the extent of the Baghdad battery. What's your have you done any research or any evidence towards these?
I haven't done an awful lot of research in those areas. I mean, I'm aware of things like the Baghdad battery. I think there's a mixture of things going back into the ancient world. The Baghdad battery appears to be some type of conventional chemical battery, but using like lemon juice as an acid and something else and a copper rod for the electrode and so on. But separately to that, there appears to be evidence that things like stone circles have a certain type of energy system associated with them. That appears to be more of a life force type energy. Maybe it's some type of orgone related energy than, electrical energy that can be used to power a motor or, a car or something. And then there's other talk of the pyramids being an energy generator. Chris Dunn's written a book about that. I've not read the book, but I've heard him talk about it quite a bit. It's called Giza Power Plant. So you could, if people are, wanted to look up that book, that's meant to be a pretty good book in that, where the pyramids are a source of energy, for example. That's quite a good book to look at.
Once again, Andrew, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Much obliged.